Did you know that there are 5 stages of puberty? And if you're a parent with a female daughter, or if you are that female daughter, you're going to want to tune in because this is such empowering information that will change your lives. Hi, I'm Dr. Patricia Mills, holistic medical doctor with the root cause approach to health, and welcome to the Wild Wisdom Show. Today, we're going to be talking about the 5 stages of female puberty every parent and young woman needs to know. And I am absolutely delighted that we have joining us today Dr. Tara Rawana. She's a naturopathic doctor, but beyond that, she's a co-founder of All About Mental Empowerment, which is a program that is supporting over 22,000 students in over 50 schools. So that's an incredible track record and experience with the very important mental health aspect of puberty. She's also the creator of Empowered Tween, a program strengthening health literacy and parent-daughter bonds. And she's always content creating. So we're going to be talking at the end how to find her so you can learn with her over social media platforms. We're going to hand this over to Dr. Rawana, or I'd love to hear from you on this super important topic.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm really, really excited to be here today and talk all things puberty.
Yay, let's do it.
Let's do it. Okay. Should we just dive right into the 5 stages?
Dive right in. Yeah, because I'm like, I want to know. I went through puberty, obviously, but no one taught me this, and no one taught my mom this, so she couldn't teach me this, and my school didn't teach me this. So it's almost like I'm learning, retrospectively, but I still feel like it's useful, even though I don't have a daughter. I have a niece, I have loved ones in my life with daughters, so I want to know.
Yeah, absolutely. And I agree. I didn't receive this education when I was going through puberty either, but I think that it is so empowering for girls and their moms to really understand this. And I think for a lot of families, puberty feels a little random, right? Like all these things are happening, and it often feels like there isn't a rhyme or a reason. And I also find that a lot of the focus tends to be on her first period, which I totally understand, right? It's a big change, big transition in her life. And so I find that a lot of the conversations are focused there, which again, not necessarily a bad thing, but there's so much more going on that girls really need support with. So if we start all the way at stage 1 of puberty, stage 1 is actually before any physical changes happen. And the big thing that we start to see in stage 1, which it can be hard to identify when she's actually in stage 1 because there aren't physical changes, but we start to see some emotional shifts in girls. And I love educating girls and their parents on this. I see a lot of tween girls in my private practice as well. And that's usually the first thing that comes up, right, with these tween girls is the mom or the dad will say, I'm noticing some mood changes. Is that normal at her age? I don't know what's going on. All of a sudden she's acting so different, or, snapping at her siblings. Is this normal? What do we do about this? And so I just love educating girls about that and letting them know this is actually the first stage of puberty. Your emotions are going to feel really big. Your brain is really rapidly changing. New hormones are entering the chat, right? There's a lot going on. And I just think that it is so empowering for girls to know that, especially when it comes to those invisible changes, because every girl thinks it's just me and there's something wrong with me. And so having these conversations early on is really, really so key.
Amazing. And what is the age range that parents can expect to start to see those shifts?
Great question. Usually around 8 years old is when girls are in stage 1 of puberty. So I always say, if you're starting to see some of those signs, then start having those conversations. But if you're not sure, then I always recommend just starting that conversation around 8 years old.
And the conversation being, what you're experiencing is normal. So the normalization is so empowering, is because of these female hormones going on board. Your brain is adapting to these new hormones, and there's going to be a shift, a period of transition. And it's not bad. It's a change that will bring you into your greater self. Are those the words you use, or? mouth.
No, that's great. I love that. Yeah, absolutely. That is what I'm saying. And I also really love, so there's a tool that I love. It's called the Wheel of Emotions. It's something that I talk about all the time. I used to joke that talking about the Wheel of Emotions is like 50% of my job. I talk about it so much in the work we do in schools. For good reason, it is such a good tool that really helps kids name their feelings, which can be really challenging for a lot of kids. And, by the time that they get into their teen years, they don't want to name their feelings as much. And so starting this around 8 years old is really important and helps them to build emotional literacy. So I always encourage parents in that first stage of puberty, start to have some conversations about different feelings. Help her name what she's actually experiencing in her brain and in her body. And then from there, we can help her start to develop really good coping strategies, whether that's breathing or taking a moment to herself, or I just talked about this with a patient, having a dance party when you're feeling a little overwhelmed by your siblings, right? Like there's so much that we can do. And I find that often girls at that age, they're very receptive. They're curious, right? And they know that their feelings are really big and overwhelming. And so when we can normalize it and start to give them tools to name it and tame it in a way and cope with what they're feeling, it can be super helpful. So I say all of those things.
I love it. That's so amazing. And looking back, I can already tell how that would have been very helpful for myself and will continue to be helpful moving forward for so many parents and young women. So what would be stage 2?
So stage 2 of puberty, this is when we actually start to see those physical changes. And so for 85% of girls, the very first physical sign of puberty is breast buds. And then for the other 15%, it is the development of pubic hair. And so again, around 8 years old, and the way that I like to talk about the stages of puberty is that you're always preparing her for the next stage, right? So in stage 1, have those conversations about feelings and then let her know, pretty soon you're probably going to develop breast buds. And here's, what that is and what that might feel like. And, even if a female, like a mother, is having these conversations, it's hard for us to think back to puberty, right? Like, I don't remember every detail about developing breast buds. Like that feels like forever ago. But, when a girl's developing them, they can be itchy. They can be quite uncomfortable. And so letting her know, again, that's normal. That's expected, right? It's so empowering at that age because the way that their brain is changing too is that they really care so much about fitting in, right? That's such a big theme in the tween and the teen years. And so the moment that they think that they're different or they're changing faster or slower or something is unusual, it's really challenging and it can really occupy a lot of mental space for them. So these conversations about what's normal, it really changes the game for them. It's so, so helpful at their age.
Absolutely. I mean, I was a bit of an early developer. I had early breast buds and then got a bra, and I felt so out of place and so weird because I was the first one. And, the boys mostly would make fun of me and kind of snap the bra on the back. Like, I don't know if they're still doing that, but I feel like they could.
I hope not.
I know. Looking back, oh my goodness. And you're right. Having been mentally prepared for it and having a conversation for it, maybe even a little celebration around purchasing a bra and making it fun and, being made to feel special and celebratory versus like, oh, what's wrong with me? No one else has this yet. I can already see that being incredibly wonderful experience for a young woman and her parents too.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I love what you said about celebration because we get to craft this narrative for her, right? I always joke that puberty has really bad PR, right? Like everything that everyone hears about puberty is like the worst, right? Like what do we hear about periods? Oh, you're going to get your period. You'll have it forever. That sucks. It's so painful. It's so annoying, right? So Of course they're scared, right? It has the worst reputation. But we have a lot of power to change that. We can be really intentional with how we approach these conversations by, even just educating her. Like that goes such a long way in helping her to feel like, again, like this isn't like a weird, unnatural thing that she's going through. Yeah. So celebrating the first bra, I always talk about celebrating the first period as well. We can really shift that narrative for girls.
And we have to shift that narrative. What you described, the whole thing about, oh, the period's annoying and I don't like it and it can be painful and all those things, that is the common narrative and we need to change it. So thank you for being a voice in the space. And what would be stage 3 then?
Mm-hmm. So stage 3 of puberty. So I'll fast forward a little bit. Stage 4 of puberty is when girls get their first period. And so in stage 3 of puberty, we start to see some of the signs that her period is just around the corner. And I should mention too that in all of these stages, we're also seeing those mood, emotional changes continue to shift as well. And something that we actually see in stage 2, that's when her circadian rhythm starts to shift. So I see this really often in my programs, but in my practice as well, is all of a sudden girls don't want to eat breakfast anymore. They're not hungry at all in the morning. And, sometimes parents are concerned about that, but it's actually a very natural shift. The way that her, internal clocks and systems are shifting is that she doesn't feel tired until a little bit later now. She doesn't feel hungry until mid-morning instead of first thing in the morning. So that's a big change that we see as well that, again, just a lot of parents and girls are not aware of. So that's something that happens in stage 2. And then in stage 3, this is generally in terms of the mood symptoms. We generally see mood swings peak in stage 3. So again, stage 3 is right before her first period. And so hormones are doing their thing. They're very active, right, in her body. And so mood swings they can be a challenge in this phase for sure. And then in terms of the physical changes that we see, so a girl will start to notice vaginal discharge about 6 months to a year on average before her first period. And so this is something that we see in stage 3. And it's a really great sign that her period is coming up, that it's just around the corner. Another thing that we see in stage 3 is a big growth spurt. So her biggest growth spurt yet will happen in stage 3. And for most girls, actually, after they get their first period, they don't grow a whole ton. They maybe grow a couple inches after their first period for most girls, but the majority of that growth is in those first few phases or stages of puberty. So stage 3, vaginal discharge, big growth spurt, and those mood swings tend to hit a peak.
Can you provide a bit of guidance for the parent who has a daughter who's experiencing these mood swings? As a parent, it can be very triggering because you want to accept it all and you want to normalize it. And you also want to teach them how to be a kind human, interacting with other people and particularly their own family members in a respectful way. So are there any strategies for parents to navigate that?
It's such a great question. And I love speaking to this side of it as well. I think as she goes through puberty, as her moods and hormones shift, there's a lot that parents go through as well, right? There's so much navigating of newness that happens during these years. And something that I also really like to validate for parents is that there may be grief here as well. As your daughter is growing up, as her body's changing, as she's, finding more independence from you and the family unit, I often speak to parents who can recognize that there's grief there and there are big feelings there just for them as she's going through this big transition. And I agree. I think the mental health piece is challenging to navigate on both ends, right? You want to be patient, you want to teach her all the best things, but you're right, it is really triggering and that can be really tough. Something that I really like to talk to parents about is how we can do our best to validate her feelings. And something that I like to educate about as well is that we have no control over our feelings. So we do have control, of course, over our actions, but our feelings are automatic. They're immediate and as a response to whatever is happening around us. And so when we're having conversations with kids about their feelings and their reactions, I really like to try to focus the attention or where we can make improvements on their actions so that we don't start to criticize their feelings necessarily, because again, they can't really control that. And what we see in the research is that kids at this age, when they're going through puberty, their amygdala is really active. So the part of the brain that's controlling their emotions is like on red alert. I talk about it with kids like one small thing will set off that fire alarm in your brain, right? Every emotion feels like 100%. And what we actually see in the research is that when a parent can validate that feeling, so even just saying something like, I can understand why you're feeling upset, like even just something as simple as that, taking some time to validate that feeling, it shifts her brain out of that amygdala response and back to her prefrontal cortex that can help her make logical decisions and choose a good logical next step in terms of coping and choosing the right actions, really. And so that's where I tend to focus with parents is let's talk about how we can validate that feeling. And that also doesn't mean agreeing with that, that reaction that she had. That's it. I try to really tease those things apart. We can understand that she's having a big feeling. That doesn't mean that we agree with the way that she's coping. But if we don't take the time to validate and help her realize that we're with her in this moment and we see her in this moment, then we're probably not even going to get a chance to help her with the action piece because we'll probably push her away even more.
So would it look something like, I understand that you're feeling angry, and it's also important to understand that for you to understand that you can't let that anger harm other people around you as a consequence. So we have to find other ways to, express that anger or to talk about it or to action it out in a way that won't be hurting those around you. Is that kind of on the right track? Or
Absolutely. Yep, absolutely. And I love exactly like what you were saying is like, how can we tease those things apart, right? So I understand that you're angry and it's okay to be angry. I get angry too, right? We all do. That's just normal human healthy emotions. And then exactly, it's like teasing that apart, right? You can be angry, but there are wrong actions. And hitting your brother when you're feeling angry, that's not the right action, right? Yeah.
I feel like these tips are also good for parents with boys.
Yes.
Mother of two boys. Wonderful. Thank you so much for that clarification. I find that certain phrases can be like keys that unlock a door. And if you have the right key, it just makes that opening that door that much easier. So anytime you have a helpful phrase that you commonly teach people, feel free to throw that out for us during this interview. I like that one a lot. So now we've gone through stage 3. It's the vaginal discharge, the peaking of the emotions, the peaking of the growth spurt.
Yep.
Now we're in stage 4, which is the getting their first menstrual period.
Yes. And even just going back a little to stage 3, I love educating girls and parents on discharge. Nobody's talking about discharge, and we need to, right? Every girl, woman in the world experiences discharge, and nobody's talking about it, right? How much is normal, right? Girls have no idea. I've had girls in my office say, I feel like I have way more discharge than I should, right? But what is actually normal is half a teaspoon to a full teaspoon every day. That can be normal. And especially in the teen and tween years, sometimes they have more discharge. Their hormones are still figuring things out. And so it's actually really common for them to have quite a bit. And so I talk to girls about, you can wear a small pad if that makes you feel a little bit more comfortable. Going through and talking about some signs of abnormal discharge, right? If it's green or gray colored, that could be a sign of an infection. And really having those conversations so that girls can just understand their bodies so much better. And that's always been my goal with all of this, right? Is let's educate girls during this, oops, hit my mic there, but let's educate these girls as they're going through this first big transition in their life, right? There's so many unknowns that exist. And I see it create a lot of shame and a lot of confusion for girls. So have the awkward conversations. I always say that to parents, like, let it be awkward, let it be weird, whatever, right? Like your discomfort in that moment results in a girl who is so confident and understands her body for decades to come. It's worth it, even though it's awkward.
And also, I remember once I read a post of yours on Instagram that talked about this, and it creates connection, that awkwardness, that getting out of your comfort zone, whether it's like the father or the mother, it allows you to dive deep into something, like you say, that no one's talking about.
Yeah.
And I think the daughter would understand that this is a, kind of a challenging topic sometimes to broach. And the fact that the parent cares enough to start the conversation and to support them, that awkwardness can actually be quite healing and connecting for some parents. So I love that. Yeah. Embrace the awkwardness.
Yeah. And I love what you said. It's so true, right? And so often I talk to parents and they ask, okay, what can I do to make sure that I stay close to my daughter? We stay connected, that she comes to me with questions. And my answer is it's always this, right? Like, have these conversations, be vulnerable enough, right? And then you become that knowledge source for her, right? Every parent wants their child to ask them the big questions, right? Much later on, about sex, about the things that we're worried about, right? But it starts now. It starts with you being vulnerable enough to talk about discharge, to properly educate her on her period and all of these things that feel uncomfortable, so that when she feels uncomfortable and has questions about uncomfortable things, you are the one that she comes to. You've built that relationship over time. So important.
Yeah, and it's not that you need to know the answers. You could say, well, this is a great question. Let's find the answers together. Let's find an expert or a really good person on this topic that can clarify. So I love that. It's maintaining the open lines of communication, which is so key for parenthood. And then stage 4 is period. And what about that stage that we need to know other than that they get their period?
Yes. So one of my big tips is that, so once your daughter notices discharge, at that point, I say to put together a period kit. So a period kit, just a few items that she can put in her backpack. I often say to put it in like a pencil case, like a small pencil case. So having some pads in there, period underwear, an extra pair of underwear, some disposable wipes that she can use. I always like my bonus item in there is to include a sweet note from you, because that moment can be a little intimidating, right? Even if she's ready. So I always say, help her practically, emotionally and practically feel prepared for this milestone, right? Kids spend a lot of time out of the house. And so having these items with her as she goes to school or, goes to a birthday party, whatever, it's there in case she needs it. And then another big tip that I give is have girls practice their period products before the time comes. So let's say that she's going to use period underwear. A lot of girls love period underwear. So comfy. It's a great product. And what I say though is, once you notice discharge, once a month, a couple times a month, whatever works, practice wearing your period underwear. Get used to the sensation of, it's different, right? Like get used to a different thickness in your underwear, pretty much, right? Like get used to that feeling so that when you do get your period, it's just one less new thing, right? We're eliminating some of the new things. Or whether, she's going to use pads, practice wearing a pad, right? I think we think that wearing a pad is very intuitive, but it's not. Whenever I sit with girls and we talk about period products, I ask them, okay, where do you think this sticks? And they're like, Well, I guess on your underwear, but how far up or how far back? What are these wings? Where do these go? Like it's a lot of new, right? And so that moment that she gets her period is very new. It's intimidating, even if girls are ready for it. So how can we eliminate the vast majority of the new ahead of time? So that's practically being prepared with the period kit. And then also practically being prepared by practicing wearing those products. So those are things that I actually like to do in stage 3, so that in stage 4, when she gets her period, again, she's feeling ready for it. And then even when it comes to getting her period, there's so much that is important to talk about. One thing that I love to talk to girls about are the 4 phases of a menstrual cycle. And I find that it is such an empowering conversation. So many girls that I've worked with are perfectionists, and they put a lot of pressure on themselves to, be the best gymnast in the group or the best soccer player or whatever it is. There's so much pressure that they put on themselves. And when I talk to girls about the different phases of their cycle and explain how their mood and their energy shifts throughout the month, it is such a beautiful invitation to build more self-compassion, because then she learns, okay, you know what? In my luteal phase, maybe I'm not the best runner on the team. Maybe I just need to take it a little easy. And they notice these things in themselves already. And so when we can, again, validate that experience, like it's not you, it's your hormones, it's the way that your body is designed. It's such an invitation for more self-compassion. And I see that shift happen so much. And it's such a beautiful thing.
Yeah, I love the conversation of explaining how the phases are like seasons of the year. And it's not that one season is bad, but you just have different activities and different energies around each season. So yeah, the couple of weeks before your period is like winter, you hibernate, you get cozy, you go inward more. And after your period, it's like spring, you start to get more energy. And then around the ovulation phase, which is midpoint, it's like summer, all the energy, you get out, you socialize, everything feels easy. And then after that ovulation period, this in the second half of the cycle, again, just before luteal phase, it's kind of like winter time, kind of settling down into things. So when we are able to create a narrative that turns, things from being a negative perspective, like a negative lens, like, yeah, now you're going to menstruate and every month you're going to have to use these pads. It's very annoying, but it's just the way it is for girls. We just have to put up with it. It might be painful. Here's some medication for your pain. Like that kind of, it's a very like scientific approach. It's almost like we need to reintroduce a bit of the sacred around the menstruation cycle, like creating this sort of linking it to nature and linking it to positive, perceptions of it as opposed to negative. That simple shift can change a woman's life forever. Their entire life can be changed by that kind of talk, that kind of conversation. So I love that you are including that in your empowered tween programs, all of your mental health aspects of things. Like that's a very important aspect of the way that women are, coming of age these days.
Absolutely. I so agree. And I have this conversation with many girls even before they get their first period. And I think, and I explain it exactly how you do, right? Is connecting it to those seasons. And so even if they aren't, having those monthly cycles just yet, they can still connect to those feelings associated with those different seasons. And then when they do get their period eventually and they start to notice those shifts, everything just falls into place for them. So I agree. And I see it with even so many adult patients that I have, right, who are just learning this now about their bodies and how much compassion comes from that. I just think about if we can deliver this education right from the beginning, right, how much more gentle and loving and compassionate can we be with ourselves?
Yeah. Oh, so beautiful. I love it. And I think it's interesting that having your period is the 4th stage. Having your first menstrual period is not the first stage of puberty, it's the 4th stage. So I love that we've talked about the 3 stages leading up to it. and now getting into the fifth stage. What is that actually? I didn't even know there was a stage after getting your period. So I'd love to hear
Yeah. Yeah. So there aren't any new changes necessarily that we see in stage 5. So everything continues to progress. So breast buds that we saw in stage 2, they're continuing to develop until stage 5. Same goes with pubic hair as well. We see that change throughout all of the stages. Something that I do like to educate girls and families about is how some of these things progress. So for example, when it comes to pubic hair, I really like for girls to know that your pubic hair can extend all the way to your inner thighs. And what we know is that for, I don't know the exact percent. I don't think we have good data on this, but for many women, they have hairs just outside of their nipple. And
Yeah.
so that's super common. And those are things that we see in stage 5. And so a lot of the time, so stage 5 is usually mid-teens, is when girls get to around stage 5. And so for a lot of girls, they think they're done puberty, right? They think all of the changes are done. And so when their pubic hair all of a sudden reaches their inner thighs and no longer just around their vulva, or they do develop coarse hairs just outside around their nipples, they think they have some sort of hormonal imbalance or something is wrong. And so I really like for girls to know that these are changes that you may see, but they come later on. They're still part of puberty, but they're later, just so that we can get ahead of that, right? Again, I don't want girls feeling like natural, normal things are causes for concern. And so educating them on the progression of all of these changes, I find to be very empowering.
So that's amazing. And it actually leads me into one question that I had, which is, sorry, I'm going to read this out loud, but from a naturopathic lens, how can we distinguish between a healthy puberty process versus early signs of hormone imbalance, before the symptoms become diagnosable as PCOS or premenstrual dysphoric syndrome, premenstrual syndrome, those kinds of things? Do you have any thoughts on that?
From my experience, it seems challenging to identify during puberty. What I see a lot actually in girls who recently got their first period or into their teen years is very heavy bleeding. And so that always kind of sets off my spidey senses and helps me to investigate a bit further. I would say that when it does come to more of those hormonal imbalances and those signs, that tends to be one of the first signs that I see that gets me curious. I find that when it comes to PMS and PMDD in this age group, it can be very challenging to distinguish. There's still so much going on in terms of how moods are shifting and that new influence of her hormones. So I really try, again, to just continue these conversations about the awareness, right? And when girls can identify, no, it is really luteal phase specific. And these, I think when we have these conversations about puberty, it gives them really good language. And I find that so often in the girls who have done my program and then become patients of mine, they say, I know I have heavy bleeding because I'm having more than, what we talked about, more than 3 to 4 tablespoons. So I think might be something wrong. Let's dive deeper. Or they tell me, I feel a lot of mood changes in that phase, that luteal phase right before my period. Let's dive deeper. So I think that this puberty education can really give them the language to bring up these things with their care providers as things maybe feel outside of what we see to be common and normal.
And would it be similar root causes in the field of kind of getting into dysfunction, like beyond the normal range? Is it similar as older women where it's, diving into nutrition, so nourishing the body, stress, how to support stress, looking at toxins coming in? I know there's a lot of conversation on endocrine disruptors, so basically chemicals found in makeup, body lotions, body products, things that girls are being very exposed to at a younger and younger age, potentially causing hormone imbalance? Are those things that play into this age group as well?
Absolutely. I would say that the biggest that I see and really work on with patients is the nutrition piece.
Mm-hmm.
So, what we actually see in the puberty research is that insulin, which is one of the hormones involved in when it comes to nutrition, it's very involved in blood sugar regulation. And when insulin is high, it can have mood effects, acne, lots of different things that we see. And what we know is that during puberty, so between stages 1 and 3, before her first period, insulin gets a little wacky. And it's because growth hormone actually opposes insulin. And so when growth hormone is very active in the body, insulin becomes dysregulated. And then once a girl gets her first period, growth hormone goes way down. And so insulin can resume regular functioning in the body. But what I actually find, and I've been running this frequently in girls after their first period, looking at their fasting insulin, I'm seeing really high fasting insulin in teenage girls. And so nutrition is a big place that I focus with these girls. And there's a lot of reasons why we're seeing blood sugar disruptions with these girls or dysregulation. A big piece is that circadian rhythm shift. And so a lot of kids are not eating regularly enough. They're going, they're not having anything for breakfast, and then they're starving, when they get to school and they get a cookie from the calf and then skip lunch and then have dinner at home. And it's often not enough nutrients to really support their bodies. And so nutrition is a really big focus in my practice when it comes to supporting these tween and teen girls, for sure.
I love that. And, I like to observe things in my environment. And what I observe is drinking a lot of sugar heavy things. Like, kids are really going to these like fast food places or even, gas stations and buying the slushies and the drinks and the pops and the juices and this, fruit, lots of fruit smoothies, that kind of stuff. And then just the quick, as you say, go-tos like a granola bar, a cookie or a pastry or, just something very quick on the go, as you say. So like when you first said that thing about breakfast, what immediately came to mind was the parent maybe instead of forcing them to eat, because it seems strange to eat when you don't feel hungry, maybe packing them a super nutritious, breaking your fast meal that you can have at any time in the morning where you do feel hungry. So you could take it to school, you could eat that nourishing food, which would not be a granola bar. That's very, high sugar, but it would basically be maybe a combination of breakfast and lunch, or maybe it would be lunch-like foods, whatever that is. But having that at your disposal at school so that in between one class and another class, you can kind of get it down, so maybe even a soup or something. I don't know. I'm just kind of making things off the top of my head here. It would require some planning and discussing with the child, the daughter, what she likes and doesn't like and what's possible. It's worth problem solving that, it sounds like. And it's also the same challenge that older women have. So this is, if you can teach your daughter how to manage her blood sugar or blood glucose levels at this age, you're giving her a gift for life, and you could prevent PCOS, polycystic ovarian syndrome, getting more severe PMS or PMDD, which can be horrific for the daughter, for the parents, really severe mood disorders, fibroids, endometriosis, infertility in the future, early problematic perimenopause, a difficult menopause. I mean, this is such a gift. So what I want to do is I want to make sure that people know where to find you, right? How to connect with you. So Tara, how would you, how do you get people to, enroll in your courses or find out more about you or follow you on social media?
So I'm active on Instagram. You can find me at dr. Rawana, my first and last name. And I have all the links to everything on there. So we can definitely connect on there, and I can point you in the right direction for whatever support you're looking for yourself and your daughter as you navigate this time.
Amazing. And I'll also, in the caption of the show notes, put links to your website and to your Instagram, and even the link to your program, Empowered Tweens, so people can put themselves on the wait list. I've heard amazing things from people who have attended. If I had a daughter, I would 100% sign up for it. And it sounds like we don't have to wait, till they're like in their later years. Even an 8-year-old to benefit before going through the different stages of puberty with the parents, so that everybody's prepared and excited, and kind of the intersection between science and the sacred, making it a beautiful experience, but very evidence-based, which I think is wonderful. Anything else that you want to add to our audience that you think might be helpful for them today?
Great question. I think just going back to what we were talking about with the grief and the feelings that parents have going through this, I think that that's something that isn't talked about much at all, right? And of course, a lot of the focus is on your daughter. A lot is changing with her, but I just think it's really important for parents to also make sure that they're filling their own cup during this phase of life. It can be challenging. It can be very challenging. And so, something that I always like to do with parents is have them reflect on their own experience going through puberty as well. Oftentimes, it can bring up a lot as we work through this with our own girls. A lot of us, again, didn't get any puberty education, and there might be some resentment there. There might be some fear, or you might still be holding on to a lot of myths about periods and puberty and all of the things. And so I just really encourage parents to do that reflection and really support themselves during this phase as well.
I feel like, from a personal perspective, I'm still carrying a lot of issues as a result of not having navigated that before. And I'm curious to see if simply listening to what you had to say and learning this, if I experience some level of healing on a subconscious to conscious level, because I think that it can be, retrospective healing is possible, and learning things now that we wish we knew back then is still empowering. It can still change our lives currently. So I can go back and reparent myself with this information, my, inner child. And I'm excited to actually do this now. So I think, on behalf of mothers, fathers, adults with children in their care who are female, and for the young women out there, I just want to thank you so much for doing this. Like, I'm actually kind of tearing up, because I know that I have a very great hope for the future, of humankind. It may feel sometimes like things are going to hell in a handbasket, but I choose to focus on all the positive initiatives. And this is a very beautiful, positive initiative that is a game changer for, for humans and for women in particular. So from the bottom of our hearts, thank you so much for this beautiful work.
Thank you so much. That is so sweet. I feel so honored and grateful to do this work. I love it. And I agree with you, right? Like we get to have such a big impact on the next generation. What are we leaving to them, right? What knowledge, what wisdom can we impart? And I hope that this can be a small part of that, because it's something that we can do, and it's something that we can change. We can provide for girls that we just wish we had. So thank you for the kind words.
Amazing, Tara. And if you, the audience, have any questions about this, please put it in the comments of my YouTube channel. That's where I tend to check things the most, and I'm most responsive, and we'll be sure to either answer those questions or gather them for a future episode where we can go deeper. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to my YouTube channel, Dr. Patricia Mills, MD. It's the best way to support the Wild Wisdom Show. Save this for future reference in case you may need this one day, and share. Sharing is caring, and you never know when someone may benefit from this wild wisdom. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. Hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, evening, or night, depending on when you catch this, and we'll see you next time. Bye now.
Bye.